regions and how they all get along and which languages they use?
Yeah. Well, language is, you'll see Singlish in here. If you haven't heard Singlish, I think there was a little bit of it in my story, but it's kind of the local pidgin that we speak. It's English, Malay, and Chinese mixed in primarily. And sometimes even if all the words are English, you might not understand the sentence completely because the sentence structure is Chinese, for example. Like a popular phrase is, if you ask me something and I don't really know the answer and I think you're being stupid, like I'll be like, you ask me, I ask who. It's like, because in Mandarin we would say, ni wen wo, which way? And so the exact thing in English is you ask me, I ask who. Malay, for emphasis sometimes, a word is said twice. So sometimes, the word will be said twice and that's the reason why. La is tacked on to the end of a lot of sentences. As for emphasis, it's kind of, I've been told it's sort of like a Canadian A or man you would use here. So, so it's sort of, so you'll hear la a lot. But English is the primary language spoken among everyone because when the Singapore government was formed in the 1960s, they decided, okay, well, if everyone's going to get along, we all have to speak the same language. And we used to be a British colony, so English is taught first, and then for me, I'm Chinese ethnically, so I have to learn Mandarin. If you're Malay, you have to learn Malay. But everyone ends up speaking a little bit of everything, at least enough to order food. The important things.
Okay, so you live in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But you were born in the location you were born, and you're the law specialist. So where's the plane?
Where's the what?
Where's the plane?
The plan?
The plane?
The plane?
We're obsessed about the plane.
Oh, the plane.
Singapore and Malaysia are always fighting. No, I'm kidding. So we really don't know where it is, but we didn't do it. I have absolutely no idea. I'm sorry.
So the Malaysian government, are they strange?
I don't personally know anyone in the Malaysian government. I know people in the Singapore government, and they're all very nice, but everyone's a little strange, I think.
So I assume that these were all written in English.
Yes. Most of the writers in Singapore, they write in English. Well, these writers anyway. There's also Malay lit in Singapore, and like Mandarin lit and Tamil lit. Every year, like the Arts Council gives out these awards, and so the award ceremonies are very long because they're like 4 big categories. So it's great to see like a country with a really thriving sort of like and broad lit culture and being supported as well. But I was always a little frustrated that when I moved here, I didn't see some of these names here because they're not published by U.S. publishers, they're published by Asian publishers, or maybe some of them have moved over to UK. So now I'm hoping that this book will, if you see someone's name, someone's story that you like, it might help. Someone might be like, oh, I want to read more from Philip J. Ratnam, or I want to read more of like Ovidia Yu's plays or something, and they'll start to seek them out.
As the editor, how much work do you do from what they gave you? As you can Americanize it at all, or something?
Yeah, well, I mean, all the writers, including Lawrence Osborne, who's British, turned in everything in British spelling. So we had to change everything to American spelling, and they were fine with it. They understood. But then when the Singapore publisher bought, this is a Singapore cover, by the way. It's much more lurid. And people always ask me if that's me. No, it's not me. My skirt would have been shorter. But as my friend Jim has said, when he saw this cover, he said, "You're putting the lu in lurid." They were written in English, but in British English. And then we sort of, when the Singapore publisher bought it, he was like, "Why is this all Americanized?" And we had to change it all back. But it's but that's how it was.
You said this was your first shot at writing noir. How much research did you do, and what did you research specifically to come to this?
I did a lot of research about how boats work. I've never driven a boat before. You don't call it driving a boat, right? Anyway. So how boats work, how fishing works, and how keelongs work. And also, I had been on a keelong fairly recently, and I had taken like a few dozen photos. So I felt like I sort of could see the intimate spaces of where they lived and how closely they lived, and what sort of everyday life was like a little bit. So that was my research. Some of the writers in here, I asked them where their stories came from, because one of them, he's been asked about it a lot because everyone knows him as this sort of, partner in a law firm, and he's very straight-laced, and his story is like, very sexy. So he said he was inspired a lot. Singapore's had a bunch of sex scandals recently. They're crazy sex scandals if you look them up. So he said his story was inspired by that. And also there are two stories in here that are about maids. There are a lot of maids in Singapore. There's huge maid culture in Singapore. The government has made it very inexpensive to get help, live-in help from Indonesia, the Philippines, and so there's a huge culture of help there. And so two of them center around that, which is very topical as well. So the book, in a way, is a very current snapshot, I would say, of modern Singapore, both in terms of place, scandals, and also things that people are discussing, and the changing complexion of the country, and people's discussion of race and expats and their role in our country. So if you're curious about Singapore, this will be a good snapshot for you.
But for you, how much was it reading other noir books to kind of get a feel for the genre, and how much was it like reading police reports or whatever for like other crimes that have happened in the area that you covered in your story?
Yeah. Well, I may have spent most of my journalistic career writing about fashion, but I actually started out working Sunday cops at the Baltimore Sun, and that was one of the best jobs of my life. And so, you show up on a Sunday, and all the terrific homicides happen on Saturday night, and it's like, there were 4 last night, where do I start? I always sort of remembered sort of a lot of those sort of stories being very, sort of grabbing me. I remember them till now. But also, I love Patricia Highsmith, and I thought about her a lot. And when I was writing my own story, I thought a lot about Flannery O'Connor. Actually, I love. She's one of my favorite writers. And I know it's not noir per se, but sort of the atmospheric feel of her stories was what I tried to think about a lot, and also Hitchcock as well. So those were sort of the very disparate influences.
You've lived for quite a few years away from Singapore. Do you think it's altered your perceptions of the place, or do you think you would have, because most Singaporeans are very proud of the fact that it's a very clean place, it's very orderly, and that you're one of the Singaporeans I've noticed who kind of tend towards the dark side once they're away from Singapore.
I was curious about how this book would be received in Singapore and by the government because of its content, and it's so different from the sort of the sparkling, pristine image that everyone tries to put out. But they've actually been very interested in the book. I'm leaving from here to go to San Francisco, and the San Francisco consulate is throwing a party for it. And they've actually read the book, so they know what's in it. So I'm not sure what to expect. I keep thinking they're luring me there with food and drink, and I'm gonna end up never appearing anywhere else ever again. So you never hear from me. I think it's Singapore has a sexy side, and they're curious for people to see it. So maybe that's part of it. But to answer your question. I think I do see Singapore differently than if I had lived there, because when I'm there, I'm so pressed up against everything, it's hard for me to see the story clearly with my nose up against the glass. But over here, I have such distance that I can kind of put it in greater perspective and write about it. I don't, my first book, Tiger in the Kitchen, would not have happened if I had moved away, because it was a story about missing home and missing Singaporean food and going back to search for it. And when it came out, it's funny, this is a criticism I never envisioned, but I saw some Singaporeans griping about my book on Twitter because they said, she's writing so poetically about our food. Is it really that special? And I'm like, well, maybe not to you. We eat it every day, but I don't have my grandma cooking my kitchen every day, So it's that kind of thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's better or, it's just different. If I were there, I would be writing different stories. And I'm here, I'm writing different stories. But Singapore clearly is a huge muse of mine because, this Tiger came out of that, and then this book came out of that, and my novel, which I recently completed a draft of, is also set in Singapore. So apparently I can't start writing about it, even though I don't live there.
So how is the Singaporean sex scandal different than an American sex scandal?
Well, there seems to be a lot more viral video and citizen journalism involved, or somehow I'm not. They're not all that different.
Government officials?
No, they're a lot of them involved teachers, professors. The recent ones involve professors, like law professors in particular, like sleeping with their students and making them not their slaves, but just sort of like one of them was particularly bad. So and then they went to court over it somehow. I'm not sure why. I forget what the details were, but he was basically, she was a young student and he was making her take him out to big dinners and everything, buying him Rolex watches and anyway. So it was fascinating. It's
You're right, that's better.
yeah. And then there are the ones who were the two law students who kept posting videos of themselves having sex, and one almost got expelled and got his citizens. It was like strange stuff like that. So
Negative sex.
yeah.
So is there a class system that functions over there?
Yeah, and it's funny. There's definitely, it's not as pronounced as other Asian countries, I would say, but there's definitely sort of, you can kind of see, like, you could sort of tell from the stories, like my protagonist is someone who's very much of a different class, and he's going to be of a different class than his brother, who's been able to have a college degree, and so a lot of these separations start pretty early, because the Singapore school system being what it is, like they identify the gifted kids early on, and they pull them straight up, and I mean everyone gets a good education system, so education in school in Singapore, but you can start to see the funneling happen at a fairly early age, and then that just plays out later on in life.
Right, I guess my larger question is, what did the British leave there that never left itself?
A lot of things, and actually a lot of that is explored in my novel, just sort of race and class and sexual politics and post-colonial sort of racial dynamics in Singapore. And I find that incredibly fascinating. Everyone in Singapore is like, oh, nobody here is racist. But then but then you peel back the layers and you kind of see very deeply entrenched attitudes about, who you will marry, who you won't marry, who you will date, who you won't date, who you'll do business with, who you won't do business with.
But we have a better attitude. We have it called ethnic pride. Over here, you call it racism as an excuse.
Big topic. Are you going to the UK to promote this book?
No, I'm not. Although two of my writers, one is based in the UK and one is British. So, but if I do go, I will let everyone on Facebook know.
Singapore does do a really good job of presenting a pristine, almost rigid kind of perception of this country. You think with all that pristineness and rigidity, there's got to be a sense of darkness that goes on.
Yeah.
It's quiet underworld of naughty things.
It's true. I'm always, because I think Singapore is a perfect place for a lot of these stories to happen because it's such a pressure cooker. When you spend your whole life like trying not to be something or being told you shouldn't be something, that's all you can think about. So I think in some ways that's what makes it perfect in a way for a lot of these stories because something's going to give. If you spend your whole life surrounded by all these rules, not just government rules, but societal rules as well. You're going to feel so much pressure at some point, something will explode.
So the tax code and the fight, I'm wondering, I know that it's a very wealth-induced place, and I'm wondering if the economy is because of the money is attracted because of the stability that's enforced on the country, or if it's part of the growth cycle of China, or why exactly the money comes in there. And if it's equitably distributed through taxation.
Well, I mean, it's Singapore is socialist democratic, and so I would say it's more even than others, and if you universal healthcare is amazing there. it's pretty much free for everyone. You know, I had to go to the doctor once when I was home, and the visit at the last minute, including medicine, was like $7. You know, but it's so it's a system that really tries to take care of its citizens as much as possible, all citizens. So, you know, I don't know if that answers your question.
And then the wealth that's attracted, because it's a huge financial center, so is that a historical factor or a factor?
Yeah, partly because of its positioning. It's on the tip. It started when the British came. The British turned it from a small Malay fishing village into a bustling port because of its great location. It's surrounded by water. It's in this spot that was like right on all these trading channels, and it was the perfect spot for people to kind of do stop, you know, refuel, trade, and then go back. And so from that moment, like that was what sort of established Singapore as a great geographic location for business. And so even now, you know, it's a great hub for people who do business all over Asia. You know, to locate your company, or you know, or just to, you know, or just have a satellite office there. And as for wealth, in recent years, the government has tried to model itself a little bit more like Switzerland, and so as a safe haven for money. So that's part of why. You know.
And yet it is socialist and very interesting.
Yeah.
One last question, maybe? Very good. Okay. We got one.
Okay. So, you know, how do you see Singapore changing now? You know, now that you're away, and you think that it might lead to a Singapore Noir too at some point?
Well, you know, what's exciting now in Singapore is that the Singaporean literature scene is really blossoming, and a lot of the new guard, the young people, are people, and there are a few of them in here, are people who are really pushing the envelope in ways that the old guard didn't really. I mean, I'm not blaming them or anything, but it was just a different time, and so I think now they're a little bit braver. It's great to see. You see more gay writers there, which this is a country where it's still illegal, and so you know, so it's very brave of them to really, you know, write about. One of the writers in here was Singapore's first openly gay writer, and it was very important to me to include him in this collection because I wanted diverse voices, and you know, I know it's been hard for them to fight that fight a little bit in some ways. You know, you write a book with gay content in it, and maybe no one notices it, or like bookstores don't carry it. So that was important to me. And also one of the stories, one of the people in here is a playwright who told me this very funny story about how a Singapore publisher was putting together, she's Singapore's most prolific playwright, she's written like 30-something plays. And this publisher wanted to do like a big, like, you know, collection of all her plays. And he said, we can't include this one. And she's like, but why? He's like, well, it has 2 lesbian characters in it. And she was like, so, like, what are they going to do? Like, date each other? Like, and he said, no. He's like, you know, 1 lesbian is okay, but 2 is too much. Okay. So, you know, so what I'm really hoping that this will do is, you know, 2 things. Like, I'm hoping that it will change people's perception of Singapore here, but also in Singapore, I'm hoping that it will help, you know, encourage writers to you know, not be to write, to be unafraid of writing, and just see what comes out.
Could you get arrested if you wrote deception?
You can be fined for defamation and things like that. So they did that with a cartoonist last year, and it can be very big, these fines. So it can be completely crippling, and so people do, you know, and you're not only self-censoring when you're there, but your publisher is also self-censoring. So it's like a lot of different layers. Because even if you decide, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to do this, the publisher will be like, well, you know, let's change this. Let's take out 1 lesbian character, or, you know, let's, you know. So it's, you know, so it's much more difficult there than you would think. It's definitely nothing that you would face here. So.
You have free speech.
Well, technically, yes. Yes. So, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Skylight Books. I want to thank Henry Furman of AHA, and also I want to thank the Asian American Journalists Association. They do so much great event programming, and they do so much for, you know, just sort of having diverse voices in every newsroom. And so if you haven't looked at the website, you should. It's AHA.org.
It's a fine organization, it really is.
Yes. Thank you. And the signed book, yes.
So what I'll do is I'll move all this stuff out of the way, I'll bring out a table with a pen, and I'll sit down and sign away. We have copies of the books available at the register, so make sure you buy them before you get them signed. Thank you.
And do you have a copy of your other book here? That'd be perfect.
You know, I'll take a look.
I would like to know.